just going to ask you, what kind of factor do you think most often causes bad behaviour in dogs?
Okay, so firstly, Ollie, I'm going to have to say, when we put it in a context of bad behaviour, is it really dogs acting badly, or is it them acting quite appropriately for the way that they actually feel? So just reflecting on sort of my past experience in working with clients and their dogs, one of the main sort of, as you can imagine, with dog behaviour, there's many factors and aspects that you need to consider. But what we always covered sort of right from the very beginning was that basically behaviours are driven by emotions. So we've really got to have a look at dog emotion to see why we're getting such behaviours, and what behaviours that can seem quite inappropriate to us are very often really appropriate dog behaviour to express the way that they're feeling. So really, behaviours are just a symptom, not necessarily the cause. So does that sort of, that is very much in a nutshell there, but it might just, I mean, I've got 2 Labradors myself, so I'm very much sort of continuing dealing with dog behaviour daily, on a daily basis with my 2 dogs. But yeah, very sort of strongly, I've always looked into dog behaviour, that it's a behaviour, it's not bad behaviour.
Do you believe that anxiety is a leading factor for these types of behaviours that we see in dogs? You know, the sort of behaviours that humans would consider naughty?
It's definitely down to the individual dog. I think to put them in a sort of a one size fits all situation is really unfair to the dog, and really unfair to the families that they live with. So definitely my first approach was always to treat that individual dog as we've just said, an individual with a unique personality. So definitely, to start with, it's so important you look at all factors that could be driving these behaviours. So first off, when you're dealing with dog behaviour in any shape or form, is to do a full assessment on that dog, because to have a look, like we said, those behaviours are the symptoms. We need to really have a look at what the cause is behind those behaviours, which can be a multitude of things. It can be genetics, so going right back from mum, dad, ancestors, sort of the litter, the environment in which they've been brought up in. It can be prey drive, so individual breed specific behaviours that have always got to be thought about and considered. It can be sort of things such as pain can drive, and health situations can definitely drive behaviours. So what can look like an anxious behaviour could actually be being driven by a health situation. So really important in dog behaviour to get a vet assessment first and foremost. And I know Rufus had quite a few assessments with the vet, didn't he, Ollie, from what your mum told me?
Yes, he did.
So yeah, your vet was very closely involved. But yeah, really important, as pain drives different behaviours, as you can imagine, in dogs. And then when we go on to look at emotions like you've just mentioned, sort of anxiety, fear, tiredness can be a massive sort of contributor for dog, what we class as, what you've mentioned, bad dog behaviour. Yeah, overwhelm, over arousal, so really sort of overexcited behaviours, and the list goes on. So yeah, definitely lots and lots to consider.
So what do you believe causes, well, I say bad behaviour, it's not bad behaviour, but behaviour that us people would find undesirable in dogs? What would you say is the most common cause for that type of behaviour, and why?
Yeah, I think the way that you've rephrased the question is sort of much more open to what is causing the behaviours that we see. I think you're right, calling it bad behaviour is quite tricky, because it's bad in terms of what people think is acceptable. Whereas if we think of it as what is desirable versus undesirable behaviour, I think there are a few reasons that we see behaviour that we see as undesirable. One is that dogs learn very heavily by association and by what works for them. So if they show some kind of behaviour, whether we like it or not, if the response they get is positive in their eyes and it gets what they wanted to achieve, they're likely to show that behavior again. But if we think of behaviors that are maybe linked with something like aggression or ways that they want to repel people or repel other animals, quite often there is a fear behind that, either fear for their personal safety or fear for an object they've got, an area they want to be, something like that. And that may come from lack of experience on how to handle those situations. It may come from previous negative experiences where they think, right, now that I'm in this situation, I want to get rid of everybody else because previously it's not been in my interest for them to be there. Or sometimes we can see it as a result of them being painful or uncomfortable in themselves, and that then makes them feel quite defensive and want to repel others.
Can excitement sort of manifest itself in different emotions that don't seem like what you'd typically view as being anxiety?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we see a group of behaviors from a dog, and all these behaviors are symptoms of whatever is underlying. And much like if you had a physical complaint in a dog or a person, you would see the physical symptoms, and they could be indicative of one problem or one situation going on, or they could equally be indicative of something else. So until you've dug down and looked at actually what are the symptoms, what's the situation you find them in, what causes them to continue, what causes them to stop, it's quite difficult sometimes to say, yes, it's definitely excitement or it's definitely anxiety. I think in Rufus's case, one of the indicators that he was actually quite anxious is this inability to then calm down once he's seen them. So you might expect a dog who's quite excited to say, oh, I really want to see you and I'm bouncy and I'm jumpy and I want to get to you. Once I've done that, actually I can say, okay, I've said hello, I can tick it off my list, I might be able to do something else. With dogs like Rufus, he would go and say hello, but then he would want to do more and do more and do more. And rather than the saying hello, helping him to calm down, it actually fizzed him up a little bit more, which tells us perhaps he's not so comfortable in that situation. He doesn't know what to do. And it, like you say, it comes out looking like excitement when actually he's quite unsure and conflicted.